Thank you for your time and agreement for this interview. I am
Thank
Kamali,
you.
representing EMI Research Section at the English Language Internationalization or ELINET Network. So first, could you please tell us about yourself, the work that you do, and the role you're currently having?
Okay, thank you for inviting me. My name is Emma Dafouz. I'm a professor at the University Complutense in Madrid, in Spain, and I have been a principal investigator in a number of research projects dealing with multilingual education, internationalization, and English medium education as well.
Great. So today we're going to talk about the EMI context and EMI research that you have done. So what are the EMI contexts that you are currently involved in?
Well, based in Spain, that would be my immediate context. It would be the Spanish setting. And within the Spanish setting, I'm based in Madrid. Madrid is a very university town with lots of universities where internationalization has been an important phenomenon in the past years, probably 20 years now. Also, one has to understand that Spain is based within the European setting, and therefore back at the millennium and the 2000s, Europe put together the European higher education area, which means that there was curricular harmonization and there was mobility enhanced for students all across the European space, as well as lecturers and administration. So we kind of work, study, live in this European setting and this European scenario that actually makes English one of the leading, stronger languages to be used in education.
Wow. So do you think English medium of instruction plays an important role in the quality of higher education in Europe, particularly in Spain? And if so, why do you think so?
Okay, the question here, I think the key word here is quality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the notion of quality is something that's been emerging in the past with education associated, aligned with education, the idea that tertiary education or education in general should have a high quality. I think it's connected also with the idea of higher education having to be accountable and therefore providing evidence for this quality. I think we have to look at quality in Europe and in education beyond English medium instruction. So I think in a way it has been associated because of the idea that international programs have a higher quality because they are better connected to real world needs, to the idea of the global citizens that we want our students and our professors, our lecturers to be. So I think there has been a connection there. At the same time, I don't think that there has to be an immediate association between EME quality and education. I think we need to be very careful with associating, these labels. But yes, there is a connection in a lot of the advertising and a lot of the rhetoric around English medium education, that it's connected to quality. But as I say, I mean, one has to look into this in a more kind of careful way.
That's interesting perspective. And then I think this goes the same with my next question. As you know, people have associated English medium of instruction with an increased English proficiency. So do you think students improve their English through an EMI subject? If so, which aspect most improved?
Okay, those again are not easy questions to answer for a number of reasons. Number one, what is English proficiency? What does it mean? I mean, it's a very multi-dimensional component. You've talked about in what areas. I mean, are we talking about skills? What are we talking about here?
Mhm.
I think, again, there is an automatic association between improvement in EMI, improvement, language proficiency, and EMI settings for the, again, the assumption that this is an immersion context. So students are immersed in English most of the time, although there are different degrees of intensity. And therefore, pure immersion will, turn into develop into higher levels of proficiency. Again, research is not conclusive about this. Why not? Because we have very, very different settings with different practices. So I think providing a clear-cut answer, a black or white answer, is not possible. As I say, I mean, I have a PhD student now working in that area more particularly, and it's interesting to see that the research is not conclusive, depending on the context and on the types of exposure, on the instructional practices, and so on. But the assumption is that one, that, exposure turns into better English, higher levels of English. Of course, more hours of English would assume that. But as I say, one has to be careful about that association. I think there is an improvement. I think with a much more, in some settings, a much more systematic approach to how English is faced, or how students deal with English practices, with something much more structured, the results would be much higher. In my setting, the setting that we are researching now, we find that the students are immersed in these contexts, but they're not receiving explicit instruction in English, or meaning they're not given a lot of scaffolding to deal with difficult tasks like reading tasks or writing tasks. And they do well, but they could probably do better if there was a language focus in this particular setting. I totally believe in that. Yes.
Yeah, that's a nice perspective to that. So there are so many factors that is influencing whether or not they are in. So I agree with you saying like improvement in proficiency or improvement in subject. So they are distinct. Okay, so we're going
Absolutely.
to move to the next question. What are the key findings of the research projects that you have been conducting in the topic of EMI?
What are the key findings? Okay, I've been researching English medium education, or languages in education, for more than 20 years now. So there are many key findings. One of the major findings is that languages in education are not um, examined, are not given the weight that they would need. And I'm not saying anything new. I mean, we go back to the beginning of time when, we realized that languages used by us all the time, it plays a very important role in students' acculturation and education, but nevertheless, it is not given the importance, the weight that it definitely needs. That's one main finding. And another finding is that, and I think that definitely brought the development of our road mapping framework, which actually examines English medium education in a very comprehensive and dynamic manner. I think there was a lot of implementation of EME programs in a very rushed manner for a number of reasons: internationalization, quality, new governance models in university policy and government, and there was very little understanding of what that meant from an educational and pedagogical perspective. So that's why we developed road mapping, and we talk about EMEMAS, which really, puts English at the center, but also in relation to other languages, multilingual university settings. And again, a constant concern in our research, in my research, is that to provide a sufficient examination of languages in these settings, not only English, but other languages in these settings, in order to help our participants, students, but also lecturers in teaching in a much more, I was going to say comfortable, but in a better setting, understanding all the factors that come into play when one changes the means of instruction.
There have been a lot of helpful research you've done, and I've been looking at your research too to like put in the context of Indonesia, because Indonesia also is a multilingual country. So
That's really
regardless that we have this Bahasa Indonesia as a national language, we have hundreds and hundreds of tribal language. So that's difficult to adopt EMI in Indonesia. So I've been reading.
Exactly. This is it. This is the story. I think the term EMI only tells half the story, because you're missing out the multilingual in the whole scenario, and you're missing out university settings. I mean, it could be because, of course, there are such huge differences across educational levels that have to be looked at. So I think EME in that sense is limiting, but still. Okay.
So to follow up the answers you've given, so what are the major challenges in the EMI research that you have done?
What are the challenges? Yeah, I think it's connected to what I just said about the key findings. The key findings is that there is not enough attention or support to language issues in EMI. We know that that gap gave rise to a lot of research. What are the challenges? Keeping the interest in that need, because what happens with research and like other parts of life is that when there's something new, people have get interested, but then after years of research, people already want to move to something else. So maybe now we're going to have AI taking over our research. But I think there is still the need to continue understanding English medium settings in all their complexity. So I'm very happy that you say that in Indonesia, you're actually looking at the best ways or best practices to put together, interesting English medium programs, because each one of these programs is going to have its own realization, its own implementation, and providing, quick answers to a very complex phenomenon is very dangerous. This is what I find, people wanting to have black or white answers to issues that are very, very complex. So one of the challenges for me would be to actually examine these realities in their particular setting with their particular characteristics. And also with the people that actually are agents there, that participate there, can bring that are definitely needed to understand the educational context. I believe that these participants need to be there as involved researchers, or part, to understand the setting in itself.
True.
I don't know, I've made myself clear.
That's very clear. And that brings me to my next question, which is we've talked about the multilingualism, we'll talk about the background in diverse cultures, that these EMI may not fit like one size fits all because everyone is different. Indonesia is different, and we have a lot of cultures here, not only the cultures, but also the language. So, where do you see EMI research in the future? Because you mentioning that there has been this innovation in the EMMS, and then also we have seen the rise of ELab research, and lately there has been also the translanguaging research proposing there could be a mixing in the language in the EMI program. So, in your opinion, where do you see this EMI in the future?
That's a million dollar question. I don't know exactly, where we go. I think it's gone a long way by looking at a number of factors. But at the same time, I do think that I think there is a combination of, again, this is my understanding, or at least this is my interest, might not be everybody's, an understanding of, as I said, the local realizations of EMI, the local, and at the same time against the global. So this idea of glocalization, which is so important, which translanguaging brings in, and lingua franca might bring in with the global. So I'm particularly interested in looking at internationalization and in connection with EME, because it's often given for granted but not given enough attention to. And also interested in, I'm working on disciplinary literacies in the area as one of the areas that needs attention, definitely, when we talk about English instruction or English proficiency. We're really talking very much about disciplinary literacies in universities. So I'm particularly interested in that. And then, of course, at a higher level, I'm participating in a project led by Christina Hulgren in Open University that actually looks at steering at a distance, or political sciences and their crossover with applied linguistics and English medium education. I think that is a very, very interesting area. But of course, beyond applied linguistics at a much more structural level, institutional universities and policies, I'm particularly interested because I know very little about it. But I understand that this might not be everybody's realities. For the practicing teacher, this might be too remote. But I do think that it's very interesting to see things from a kind of meta level perspective as well, to understand what might be happening.
Yeah. So we have recruited the group of researchers working together because last month we talked with Christina Hultgren and now we're talking to you. So yeah, your video will be right below her video.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, well then we're connected. That's good to know, because I had no idea. That's good to know. It'll make sense in a way.
So there will be a connection between videos because this is a group of researchers working together.
Exactly. This is, she contacted us, me and my colleague Ute Smit, because of road mapping, because for her road mapping, the framework was a good way to operationalize, to understand very abstract notions that come from other areas like political economy and political sciences, and to actually take it to the realm of linguistics. So it was a kind of bridge between abstract political economy concepts and political sciences and applied linguistics, the bridge. Right. So for us, it was a great idea, of course.
So this brings me to my last questions, because we talk about the your interest in the intersection between internationalization and also EMI, also with the economical background and political background. So in a country that thinking of adopting the EMI, so who do you think is responsible in designing the language requirement? Should it be the institution itself, or should we take into account the government policy in language policy? What do you think?
Again, complicated questions. I don't know if I'm the right. I worked in my own university. I worked for 5 years in the international relations vice rectorate, and it was very, very interesting because I had the opportunity to see things from a more kind of top-down level. But at the same time, I got involved in English medium education from a very bottom up because I was called in by one of the vice deans in economics to actually, he said to audit the program. I remember that clearly. So I kind of have the two views. I think precisely those two views are important, when designing policies, because often we find these top-down policies that come from governments that decide that the country has to be much more competitive on a global basis, and therefore let's switch to English, and that'll solve, which is happening in some places. But of course, we also know that if these top-down policies are not well supported and understood by the people, the participants that are actually going to put them implement them, then it's going to be very difficult that they work. And of course, there's this kind of disalignment between the top down and the bottom up realities. That happens all the time. So I think it's very important that these top down and bottom up principles, ideas, drives meet at some point, so that there can be some conversations. I think, in a way, the policies, that they come from above, hopefully can come with some kind of financial support, but at the same time, and some principles that can be followed. But I think they have to be at the same time flexible enough so that institutions can implement those policies, again going back to the adapted to their local realities, so that depending on which kind of student body they have, what kind of human resources they have, they can do certain things and not others, and they have a certain autonomy to decide. I think that would be a way to actually satisfy some people involved, and so that they have a say in the whole process. Otherwise, this kind of top down, as you said, one size fits all, is not going to work. It's not going to work. I think we need a certain autonomy from institutions, university bodies, or whatever they might be, the way they are organized in particular settings, to adopt the best formula that they can that fits their needs and their setting.
That's a very great perspective, because I think I can see that you have understood this, and then you have done a lot of work here, so you know how to delineate like what should be the government share and what should be the institution share. So it has been a very inspiring talk with you. That's all for the interview. On behalf of Elinet, I say thank you.
Thank you, Camilla. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me.